Lobsters and crayfish are always an exciting day for us to have tasting in the classrooms. We're going to go through a few different species, and I'm going to teach you how to identify them and give you some suggestions for serving or ways to present them. With lobsters, there are many animals referred to as lobsters, but truly there's only two true lobsters out there, and they're the Omaris species. Just like the crab that I talked about, the stone crab, which they break off the claws, lobsters too will regenerate their claws and legs. If you ever see a lobster come in with one full-size claw and one small one and wondering why it's like that, well, it had fallen off at some point or got eaten or ripped off by another predator, and it's slowly growing a new one. The European lobsters are not as large as ours, and Maine is the largest provider of American lobsters. They actually range from Canada down to Long Island. If you think about the landscape, though, Maine has the largest coastline, lots of islands, lots of inlets, and they love that rocky substrate. So there's a lot of hiding spots for them, and the cod and all the other ground fish have a harder time attacking them and eating them. If you find a lobster as a fisherman with eggs on her tail, it's not a law, but a lot of fishermen decide to put what's called a V-notch in the bottom of her tail. You can see in the picture there's a little V cut out, and then they'll put her back in. The next person that catches her, even if the eggs aren't there, will know that she's a proven breeder and then can make the decision whether to keep her or not. Many people have put the lobsters back, and this has increased the take year over year by dozens of millions of pounds, which is quite a bit. I mean, it's an amazing story of how fishermen got together and decided to make this industry more sustainable. If you were to turn the lobster over and not see eggs, but still wonder if it was a female or a male, you can see the little swim fins to the right. Above that, if you saw two little miniature fins shaped like an X, that would be a female. If you saw two hard-shelled appendages called the gonophones, more like the letter Y, that's a male. Which one's better? Choice is yours. The reason some people go for females is because on the inside they have coral, which are the eggs, and you can make coral sauce or coral pasta. Many possibilities. They used to try to farm-raised lobsters, and they figured that the average lobster that we see in a tank at a grocery store and a restaurant is about 5 to 7 years old, at minimum. They decided that they were going to turn up the water temperature and feed them, and they wound up growing in under 2 years. The downside to this, they were forced so quickly they never developed the flavor that we appreciate. So the only place I know of left in the world that does this is on the island of Hawaii. They import the lobster larvae and they grow them out and they call them Kihole lobsters. Other than that, rest assured, lobsters are wild. Here you'll see a diagram of the lobsters. They always have a large claw. That's referred to as a crushing claw. It almost looks like it's lined with molar-like teeth, as opposed to the pinching claw, which is also referred to as the quick claw, the ripping claw, or the threshing claw, and it looks like it's lined with needles. So it'll crush what it wants with its crushing claw, shred the food apart with its pinching claw, and bring the food to the underside to its mouth. Okay? The lobster has 8 walking legs, which look like miniature claws. There is meat in there. You can eat them, but some people think it's a little too metallic for their taste. Lobsters are generally prized for their tail meat, their claws, and what's referred to as knuckles. Most lobsters yield about 20% by weight. And then you also have to decide when you buy the lobster if you want to get yourself what's known as new shell, hard shell, or old shell. New shell lobsters are usually only found in the fishing villages because they're so fragile, they're not going to transport well. They tend to be the lowest in price, and then the next one up is hard shell. From Massachusetts, they can ship those off to Boston, New York, even California with modern day airfare or air transport. They're a little more expensive, and the hardiest ones are called hard shell lobsters, or old shell, which are a year old. They're not as sweet in flavor, but they can certainly travel the distance. You'll find them in Europe, and that would be an $80 lobster versus an $8 lobster dinner overlooking a fishing pier in Maine. Here's a fun slide that shows you that lobsters molt as well, right? All crustaceans, their shell gets tight. So you can see in the middle picture around 12 o'clock, the lateral line is split on the lobster, and then Down to the left, you can see it opens up and it will pull out back from the shell and then slip out of the tail. Lobsters are going to push a lot of the water weight out of their body so they can fit through those narrow openings. At 6 o'clock, that red flesh is actually a completely picked and clean lobster. There's a company that figured out how to deshell lobster 100% by using sound waves and water pressure. You wouldn't have that machine in your restaurant, so to speak, but you could buy completely deshelled lobster that's not torn. Just for fun, that picture on the right-hand side is a 14-pound lobster. If you're wondering how old they are, lobsters grow that first pound in 5 to 7 years. Once they hit that, they start growing at about a half a pound a year. So if we have 13 pounds times half a year, we're looking at 26 years plus that initial 5 to 7. That lobster there is 31 to 33 years old. Spiny lobsters are not technically lobsters. They're more closely related to the crayfish. They do not have claws, and they're found traditionally in warmer environments in the United States. We'll find them in the Carolinas, Georgia, Florida, Puerto Rico, the Caribbean, the Virgin Islands, Mexico, Baja, Mexico. You'll find them off the coast of Southern California. You'll find them off of Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. We only eat the tails on these animals. So if you're there where they go diving for them, for example, if you go to Ensenada or Baja, California, you can go to a restaurant where they'll dive right in the water, right next to the restaurant, grab your lobsters right out of the water, grill them right up on a wood-fired grill or coals, serve them right up. But if you were to buy the tails or the animal, you're only going to be able to get the tail, and quite often, because they're highly perishable, they're treated with sodium tripolyphosphate. The only way I would recommend using spiny lobsters is if you can get them from a place that has them alive and they kill them and cook them right there. Lastly, we have the other crayfish that we eat. Some people call these crawfish, crawdads, mud bugs. In Australia, they call them yabbies. I do believe it's the only fish that is found in all 50 states. They're quite popular for social gatherings where you just cook them up by the huge stock pot full and dump them right on the table and pinch the heads and suck the tails, or suck the heads and pinch the tails. Maybe cooked up with some corn, some sausage, southern boil, low country boil, however you want to do it. The langoustine down below has many names. That langoustine is the French name, langostino in Spain, scampi in Italy, and Dublin Bay prawn in England. They're delicious. They tend to be soft, but they're very sweet, very buttery tasting. Definitely taste like buttered sweet corn. I know we always enjoy those on the day 6 tasting, so give it a shot. The downside is they are very expensive. When we buy them, they're $28 a pound. Compare that to our $7 to $8 a pound shrimp.